Here's a little word of warning about brick bending. The whole trick with brick bending is that these little Lego brick have a little bit of play in between each brick, meaning there's a little bit of space. So as I put these bricks together and I start to put pressure on them, the space gives a little bit. It compresses at the bottom and it stretches at the top. And I get a little bit of flex. Now, when I add more Lego, all of those little spaces start to add up. And I get more flex. And more Lego, until eventually that flex means that I can bend quite a bit. And I get this lovely curve. Now, the trick with this curve is that we're actually putting the Lego under pressure. As I apply a little bit of pressure, that's very stable. And really, I'm not putting that much stress on my brick. As I add more pressure, you can see the tension in the brick, and you can actually hear them creak a little bit. Now, over time, as you continue to bend your bricks, they'll actually get looser and looser as the bricks warp a little bit. So if you do not want your bricks to have that kind of loose feel to them, then absolutely don't use your Lego for brick bending. However, if all you really do is brick bending like me, looser bricks are actually a good thing. Another thing to keep in mind is that as you flex your bricks back and forth, they actually loosen a little bit. And you can see tiny gaps starting to form between the layers. So as you put your designs together, when they're finished, you want to make sure you tighten them down. And that'll give them some extra strength. But remember, Lego can only bend so far. Now, I never, ever do this. But just for this example, we're going to go for it. Whoa! Sooner or later, those bricks are going to explode and fly everywhere. And you never know when they're going to come back down. So be careful with your brick bending. If your bricks start to creak or separate, you want to make sure you keep them tight. Don't bend them too far. In the end, out of all the brick bending that I've done, I've probably broken 20 or 30 bricks. So be prepared that in the end you might actually break a few of your pieces, and sadly you might have to throw them away. Personally, I keep mine as trophies. So in the end, be careful with your brick bending, don't bend them too far, and always make sure you're safe with your Lego. This awesome build is something that I call twisting squares. Now, one of the things that's the most awesome about this particular build is that it's relatively simple once you know the trick, and you could continue to scale up to whatever degree you like. And rather than belabor this too much with all the details of every single square all the way up, I'm going to show you the general rule that I follow and how it plays out. So the iteration that we are going to build together today is 12 stacked squares. And I'm going to show you how we add that little twist. And as you can see, these squares are all connected. It's not as if they're just kind of being set on top of each other. And although the top square is definitely solid, it has an area, if you look from the bottom, all of the rest of the squares are just perimeters. They're just a single stud wide square. And if we want to dig into the real trick here, let's take off the top of this. Do that while leaving it intact. You can see that I have a square, and I am using tiles so that the vast majority of this square is smooth, so that I can do whatever I want with it. And I'm leaving just 4 1x1s, one on each of the sides, so that I can offset the next square and give it a little bit of a twist. And if we take the next square in this iteration, and I set it right on top, just for demonstration purposes, you can see that it is just one stud short, so that I get a square that doesn't quite fit inside of it. It would have to be 2 studs short in order to fit inside the square. What this allows me to do is twist just a little bit, connect those to those 4 studs, and boom, I have this twisted and slightly offset square. And I'm going to repeat that motif. So here is the basic technique that I'm working with. And we're going to start with the base of this square at 14 studs long. So I have a 1x6 and a 1x8. And on top, I've got a 1x1 plate that acts as my point of connection to the next square, and then a 1x2 tile, a 1x8 tile, and a 1x3 tile. Now, although the combination of plates and tiles differs as I go up the squares in the design, the same basic technique holds true. So this is going to be my 14 Lego stud side of my base square. And now the next side of my next Lego square, one up, is going to be 13 Lego studs. So here I've got a 1x10 and a 1x3. On the top, I've got a 1x8 tile, a 1x4 tile, and that 1x1 Lego plate. So that pattern is going to continue. All the way up to a 1x6, so a 6 stud side. So the first 9 squares in my build are all going to follow this exact pattern. And then the top 3 are a little unique, so we'll tackle those when we get to them. So what I'm going to need are 4 of each of these lengths. Now, the primary thing I want to point out to you about how each of these sides are built, and really the only real trick you need to know, is that it's all about where your plate and your tile overlap. So I try as a general rule to never have a connection that's just one stud between a plate and a tile, because it's just a weaker point and it's your point of failure. So with most of these, I have at least 2, if not 3 or more studs overlapping. And now we just need to create our squares. So 9 squares haphazardly piled. Let's add some method to this madness. Your 2 squares. I'm going to line up the tips of the top square with the single studs. Click them down nice and tight. And you've started your twist. Now it's really easy to know if you're getting the wrong square here because it won't line up. It should never fall through. That means that you have the wrong square. They should line up perfectly as you pop them down. Now, so far, this has been really easy to put together. There has been 0 tension in this build, and in fact, I would say even when it's done, you won't even get close to a 1. There's a tiny bit of tension that I'll show you in just a minute. But for the most part, this is just a really interesting curved, well, the illusion of a curve. It's all squares, but this really cool twisted set of squares. So now we need the top 3. So in one sense, the next square is going to be just what you would expect. It's going this top square right up here, that has a length of 6 that we built before. So this is a 5. I've got a 1x3 and a 1x2, and then a 1x4 tile on the top with that 1x1 Lego plate. But the trick here is that I can't have 4 sides each with this single stud. Because although the pattern as it plays out works, and if I made bigger and bigger squares, they're all going to work. Maybe not indefinitely, but for a long while. But up top, the pattern will stop working. I can't actually make that connection function. So I can only go with 2 studs for these last 2 squares before I put on that top cap. So I'm going to have that right there. And then I'm using a 1x6 with a 1x3 tile on top and that 1x1 plate. And I'm going to connect. So now it looks a lot like the other ones that I built. But from here on out, I actually just want to have all tiles. So I am going to use a 1x3 and a 1x2 plate with a 1x4 snuck in there to complete the square. And then I'm going to use tiles. That's a 1x3 and a 1x2. And if I had a 1x6 tile, I'd use it. But for me, those are pretty rare right now. So I'm going to use a 1x4 and a 1x2 tile. And now I've got a 2 stud square. Now this will pop on nice and easy. And now I'm ready for my second to last square. And this is the same deal as before. The typical side is a 1x4 plate on the bottom with a 1x3 tile and that 1x1 plate. And I'm actually, if I have 2 of those, I can create this kind of half the square. But for the rest of it, I'm going to need 2 more 1x4 plates. I'll connect. And I'm going to use 1x4 tiles to finish off the smooth edge of this square. Now I can pop that one right on top. Now this is where you'll find the connections a little trickier. It's just not quite right. So you do have to add, like I said, maybe a 1 in terms of the forced tension in this build. But we're just about done. And this final cap is really simple. I've got 4 2x2 tiles, 2 1x4 plates, and 1 2x4 plate. And I'm just going to line these up to make a square and put my tiles right on top. So a perfect square cap. And I'm going to pop that on. Again, it'll be a little tight to get that on, just a smidge. And there you have it, a set of 12 twisted squares. So as always, thanks for watching, my friends, and I'll see you at the next episode of Brick Bending.